George Washington, February 22, 1732 to December 14, 1799, was an American military leader, political statesman, and the first president of the United States. He played a central role in the American Revolution, helped establish the new American government, and became one of the most important figures in early United States history. Early life and family background. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia, in the British colony of Virginia. His parents were Augustine Washington, a prosperous planter and landowner, Mary Ball Washington. His mother Washington grew up in a family connected to farming, land ownership, and public service. His father died when George was only 11 years old, which meant that Washington did not receive the extensive formal education available to some wealthy young men of his time. Instead, he developed practical skills in surveying, mathematics, farming, land management, and business. As a young man, Washington worked as a surveyor and traveled through the Virginia frontier. This experience helped him understand the geography of the region and introduced him to frontier life. Military career. Washington's military career began during the French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763. As a young officer in Virginia, he gained experience fighting against French forces and their Native American allies. Although some of his early military experiences included serious setbacks, they taught him important lessons about leadership, discipline, and warfare. His reputation as a military leader continued to grow. The American Revolution, when tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain eventually led to the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. Washington became one of the most important leaders of the colonial resistance. In 1775, the Second Continental Congress appointed him Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Washington faced enormous difficulties. The American Army often lacked supplies. Soldiers were poorly trained. The British Army was highly experienced. American forces frequently suffered from shortages of food, clothing, weapons, and ammunition. Despite these challenges, Washington kept the army together. Important victory at Yorktown. One of Washington's greatest achievements came in 1781 at the Siege of Yorktown. Washington worked with American and French forces to surround the British Army, commanded by General Charles Cornwallis. French military and naval support was extremely important to the American victory. Cornwallis surrendered in October 1781. The victory at Yorktown did not immediately end the war, but it effectively destroyed Britain's ability to continue the conflict on the same scale and helped lead to the Treaty of Paris of 1783, which recognized American independence. Washington as a national leader. After the Revolutionary War, Washington could have attempted to gain political power through military influence. Instead, he resigned his military command and returned to private life. This decision greatly increased his reputation. Washington returned to his estate at Mount Vernon, where he focused on agriculture and managing his property. His willingness to give up military power became an important example for the new republic. The Constitutional Convention. By the 1780s, the United States faced serious political and economic problems under the Articles of Confederation. In 1787, delegates gathered in Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention to create a stronger national government. Washington served as president of the convention. Although he did not write the U.S. Constitution himself, his presence gave the convention considerable prestige and stability. The Constitution was eventually ratified, creating the framework of the United States government. First President of the United States. In 1789, George Washington became the first President of the United States. He served 2 terms, 1789 to 1797. Washington's presidency was important because many institutions of the new government had to be created for the first time. His administration helped establish a federal court system, the executive departments, national financial policies, relations with foreign countries, procedures for presidential leadership, the tradition of peaceful transfer of political power. Washington appointed important officials, including Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury and Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. Washington's economic and government policies. One of the major challenges facing Washington was the country's financial situation after the Revolutionary War. Alexander Hamilton proposed several important financial programs, including the creation of a national financial system and the assumption of certain state debts. Washington supported many of these efforts. His administration also helped establish the Bank of the United States, which became an important part of the early American financial system. However, disagreements between political leaders became increasingly intense. Hamilton and Jefferson developed different visions for the future of the country, contributing to the emergence of America's first political parties. Foreign policy. Washington believed that the young United States should avoid becoming deeply involved in European wars. During his presidency, Britain and revolutionary France became involved in conflict. Washington attempted to keep the United States neutral. In 1793, he issued a declaration of neutrality. His administration also negotiated Jay's Treaty with Britain in 1794. The treaty was controversial, but Washington believed it would help prevent another war with Britain and stabilize American trade. Washington's farewell address. In 1796, Washington announced that he would not seek a third presidential term. He left office in 1797. His farewell address became one of the most famous political documents in American history. He warned Americans about excessive political divisions, permanent alliances with foreign countries, the dangers of intense political factionalism, the importance of national unity. Washington's decision to retire after 2 terms helped establish an important tradition of limited presidential tenure. Life at Mount Vernon. After leaving the presidency, Washington returned to Mount Vernon, his Virginia estate. Washington spent much of his life managing his plantation and agricultural operations. He experimented with different crops and farming methods and managed a large estate. However, it is important to recognize that Mount Vernon was also a slaveholding plantation. Washington enslaved people throughout much of his life. His relationship with slavery changed somewhat in his later years, and in his will he ordered that the enslaved people he personally owned would be freed after the death of his wife, Martha Washington. This does not erase his lifelong participation in slavery, which remains an important and troubling part of his historical legacy. George Washington's death. Washington became seriously ill in December 1799 after developing a severe throat infection. He died at Mount Vernon on December 14, 1799, at the age of 67. His death was widely mourned in the United States and abroad. He was buried at Mount Vernon. Major contributions and achievements. George Washington's major contributions included military leadership. He commanded the Continental Army during the American Revolution and helped lead the colonies to independence. Building the new government. As the first president, he established important traditions and practices for the new federal government. Constitutional leadership. He presided over the Constitutional Convention of 1787 and supported the creation of a stronger national government. National unity. Washington tried to keep the country united despite strong political disagreements. Peaceful transfer of power. His voluntary retirement after 2 presidential terms demonstrated that political power could be surrendered peacefully. Foreign policy. He promoted neutrality and attempted to protect the young United States from becoming involved in European conflicts. George Washington's legacy. George Washington became a symbol of American independence, leadership, public service, and national unity. His importance comes not only from his military victories, but also from the choices he made after gaining power. He gave up his position as commander of the army after the Revolutionary War and later voluntarily left the presidency. For generations, Americans have remembered him as the father of his country. At the same time, modern historians examine Washington more critically, especially his ownership of enslaved people and his role within the plantation economy of colonial and early Republican Virginia. Understanding both his achievements and his contradictions provides a more complete picture of his life. Timeline of George Washington's life, year event. 1732. Born in Virginia. 1754. Begins major military service during the French and Indian War. 1759. Marries Martha Custis. 1775. Becomes Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. 1776. Leads American forces during the Revolutionary War. 1781. American and French forces win at Yorktown. 1783. Revolutionary War officially ends. Washington resigns military command. 1787. Presides over the Constitutional Convention. 1789. Becomes first President of the United States. 1793. Issues Neutrality Proclamation. 1796. Announces retirement from the presidency. 1797. Leaves office. After 2 terms. 1799. Dies at Mount Vernon. Conclusion. George Washington was one of the central figures in the creation of the United States. He was a military commander, political leader, farmer, statesman, and the country's first president. His leadership during the American Revolution helped secure independence, while his presidency helped establish the foundations of the new American government. His legacy is complex. His legacy is complex. He is remembered for his leadership and commitment to Republican government, but his life was also deeply connected to slavery and the plantation system. Studying both sides of his life helps us understand the challenges and contradictions of early American history.